Hello and welcome, we are back in action and so is Loki, whose Disney Plus original series has finally started after months and months of waiting. I'll get my one main gripe with the episode out of the way and then we'll just get on to enjoying it. So the only thing that really stuck out to me in this episode was the fact that there was a lot of exposition. But they've done it in a kind of unique way because Loki actually gets to see the future that hasn't happened yet for him. But if you're a big Marvel fan like me and you've seen all of the movies a dozen times over, a lot of this feels like familiar territory. The episode opens in 2012 and we're treated to a trimmed down version of the time heist sequence from Avengers Endgame because it's been a long time since we've last seen Loki, and the absolute balls on Marvel. They took their biggest film ever, for at a point it was the biggest film of all time, highest earning film ever, and decided, hey, let's put a backdoor pilot to a show we haven't even announced yet in our biggest film. That is such a confident, ballsy move, and I have to applaud them because I have a feeling it's going to play out, but like, to have taken a risk like that on your biggest film ever, so cool. So cool. We're then introduced to the TVA, the Time Variance Authority, and Miss Minutes, who gives us just one big expository dialogue to explain everything up until now, basically. She introduces us to the Timekeepers, who are responsible for creating the sacred timeline that is basically the MCU's way of referring to itself, and that came about through a multiversal war, which is actually a reference to the Secret Wars comic storyline, which is one of Marvel's biggest and most important, especially when it comes to talking about multiverses. She also talks about Nexus events and Nexus beings, which if you cast your mind back to WandaVision, Wanda herself is a Nexus being. Miss Minutes then says that a Nexus event could cause madness, which would lead to another multiversal war. Madness, multiverse, Nexus beings. We're talking about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness here. And that's no accident. Marvel Studios have been very, very open about the fact that Loki will directly tie into the greater MCU in ways that WandaVision and the Falcon and the Winter Soldier did not. They kind of exist as self-contained stories, which in itself is quite fun. I like that they can do that with the characters, but due to COVID, both of those shows never got their chance to connect to the larger MCU. So Loki is going to impact the wider MCU, and I think that it's going to directly influence Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Spider-Man No Way Home, and probably the Secret Invasion series, which is due out next year. I have to say, one of my favourite things about this episode was just Loki reacting to the TVA throughout the episode. He just had this like disbelief and disgust to everything that they said, so most of the episode was just him spent going crack me up every time, just so funny. The TVA, by the way, in love with the design of the TVA, everything from the lights to the set design to just the way that the animations of all their technology works. So cool, and I'm super into the aesthetic, and I really hope that carries into other locations in the show. One other wee thing that's just come back to me, and it's definitely more of a me thing with movies and TV shows in general, but when Loki made his escape and stole the time twister thing, it just really bothers me that he instantly knew how to use that. He didn't know about the TVA at the start of this episode, and immediately he knows how to use the technology. That whole scene was played for comedy anyway. I think it would have been funnier if the shenanigans came from him learning to use it rather than him picking it up, immediately knowing what he was doing with it and causing chaos. The whole thing was played for comedy, so you would have still got laughs either way, I think. I'm not a writer, but that's just my 2 cents. Two things that really elevated this episode for me were Loki watching himself die because Tom Hiddleston played it so well. Remember, this is a much younger Loki we're dealing with in this series. This is the Loki from 2012, so every piece of character development he's had since then doesn't count. So I think making him watch himself die was a really good way to make him a bit more humble and kind of speedrun a wee bit of that character development so that he's not just the same character that we saw in 2012. And the other thing that really stuck out to me in this episode was Loki discovering the drawer of Infinity Stones, because it just puts the entire MCU into perspective. Everything that we've seen from the first Iron Man all the way up to the battle for Earth in Avengers Endgame, 4 gauntlet snaps. Small time stuff. And that's not to say that all of it was meaningless and doesn't matter, it absolutely does, but like, in the grand scheme of things, that's just Tuesday for the Timekeepers.
Oh, we actually got a lot of those.
Yeah, some of the guys use them as paperweights.
It was just really cool to me that they were able to drastically change the scale of the MCU so quickly, and Tom Hiddleston's acting really sold that as well. I'm really enjoying the cast for the show so far. Tom Hiddleston is charming and delightfully dickish as always, but my favourite so far has to be Owen Wilson as Mobius M. Mobius. He plays this jaded, apathetic bureaucrat detective so well, and it's a surprising breath of fresh air in the MCU. He does have his quips and stuff, but it's really nice to see someone who really is kind of just done with everything. Oh my god, this paperwork. Oh, this department's exhausting. Oh, there's just something so refreshing about having a character be that fed up with everything. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward to seeing more of him. Wunmi Masaku was also really entertaining as Hunter B-15, and I'm really looking forward to seeing her and Loki just kind of butt heads consistently throughout the series. Now I just want to take a little second to talk about Gugu Mbatha-Raw's character Judge Ravonna, because depending on how this show plays out, she might end up being very, very important to the MCU. In the comics, Ravonna Renslayer is the love interest of Kang the Conqueror. Now if you don't know who Kang the Conqueror is, I'm going to do a whole separate video on him because there is a lot to talk about. Kang the Conqueror is scheduled to make his MCU debut in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, but over the last few months there have been a number of rumours that he might actually make his MCU debut in this series, which depending on how this series unfolds may be where he gets his motive for his actions in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which we currently know nothing about. To give you the very, very basics on Kang, he is from an alternate future, he is a master time traveller and frequently uses alternate timeline versions of himself to help him commit his dastardly deeds. I cannot stress enough how big of a deal he is in the comics, and him coming to the MCU possibly could put him above Thanos in terms of big bad villains. So I am very interested to see how this show develops, particularly with Ravonna Renslayer. With that said, remember, WandaVision, we've been through all this before, rumours are to be taken with a grain of salt, might not happen, might happen, we'll just have to wait and see. If Kang appears in this show, that'd be really freaking cool. If he doesn't, he's still going to appear in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and it'll be really freaking cool then instead. And the reason I'm reminding you of that is because amongst all these rumours, it has been suggested that the Kang that appears in Loki will be a different version of Kang the Conqueror that appears in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, but will be played by the same actor. It's going to get real weird from here. Other than that though, I don't really have a whole lot else to say. I'm a big fan of the soundtrack though, I will say that much. Really excited to hear more of that. But like I say, a lot of this episode was backstory and exposition, so there's not a whole lot for me to chew on. Although the rumours have been few and far between for this show, they are all suggesting that this show is going to be mental, and I am so here for it. So thank you very much for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to get the new videos when they come out. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you after the next episode.